What if the difference between a harmless microscopic tumor and a dangerous cancer comes down to one tiny biological switch inside the body? Right now, as you're watching this, your body is constantly producing new cells, trillions of them over the course of your lifetime. Occasionally, a mistake happens during this process, and a tiny cluster of abnormal cells begins to form. In fact, scientists now believe that microscopic cancers appear in our bodies all the time, but most of them never become dangerous. Why? Because they are trapped. Without a blood supply, a tumor cannot grow beyond the size of the tip of a ballpoint pen. It simply doesn't receive enough oxygen or nutrients to expand. Your immune system usually finds it and quietly removes it. But the moment that tiny tumor finds a way to recruit blood vessels, something scientists call angiogenesis, everything changes. Suddenly, that small cluster of cells gains access to fuel, oxygen, and nutrients. And when that happens, a tumor can grow 16,000 times larger in just 2 weeks. Before we go any further, it's important to understand why this topic carries so much attention and fear. Cancer is one of those words that instantly captures people's attention, almost like a shark on the cover of a magazine. The moment it appears, people stop and look. But with that attention often comes confusion, misinformation, and sometimes unnecessary fear. So before diving deeper into the science, let me explain where this perspective comes from. For many years, I've been involved in cancer research and drug development. My work has focused on understanding how tumors grow and how we can stop them. Over the past couple of decades, I've been fortunate to contribute to the development of multiple cancer therapies that are now approved by the FDA and used to treat patients around the world. I share this not to emphasize credentials, but to make one thing clear. When we talk about food and health, this isn't about replacing medicine or dismissing modern treatments. Developing a single cancer drug can take more than a decade of research and billions of dollars. These therapies are incredibly important tools in medicine. But what scientists have increasingly discovered is that medicine doesn't operate in isolation. The body itself contains powerful health defense systems that influence how diseases develop or are controlled. Nutrition, lifestyle, and the environment inside the body all interact with these systems. That's why the idea of food as medicine should not be misunderstood. It doesn't mean a piece of fruit replaces a prescription drug or that a vegetable is a miracle cure. Instead, food becomes another tool in the toolbox, one that works alongside medicine to support the body's natural defenses. And when we study nutrition with the same scientific rigor we apply to pharmaceutical drugs, we begin to see something fascinating. Many foods contain complex mixtures of compounds, sometimes hundreds or even thousands, that interact with the body in ways we are only beginning to understand. To truly understand how these compounds influence cancer, however, we need to look deeper beyond the tumor itself and examine the environment that allows cancer cells to survive and grow. One of the most common questions people ask about cancer is simple. Does sugar feed cancer? It's a topic that appears everywhere, from headlines to social media, and it often creates confusion. To understand the real answer, we need to look at how cells use energy. Every cell in the human body relies on glucose, a form of sugar that circulates in the bloodstream, as one of its main fuel sources. Whether it's a muscle cell, a brain cell, or an immune cell, glucose helps power the chemical reactions that keep those cells alive and functioning. Cancer cells are no different. In fact, they tend to use glucose even more aggressively than normal cells. Because cancer cells grow and divide rapidly, their metabolism is highly active. They pull in nutrients, especially glucose, to support that accelerated growth. This observation led to a widely repeated statement: sugar feeds cancer. And while there is some truth behind that idea, the full picture is more nuanced. In a healthy person without metabolic disease, the body has powerful systems that regulate blood sugar levels. When we eat foods containing carbohydrates or natural sugars, glucose rises in the bloodstream for a short period. But the endocrine system quickly responds by releasing insulin, which helps move that glucose into cells. Within a relatively short time, blood sugar levels return to a controlled range. In other words, the body prevents glucose from remaining elevated long enough to give cancer cells a major advantage over normal cells. However, the situation changes when someone has diabetes or chronic high blood sugar. In those conditions, glucose levels can remain elevated for extended periods. That creates what researchers call a hyperglycemic microenvironment, which may encourage cancer cells to grow more easily. This is why many doctors recommend limiting added sugars and maintaining healthy blood sugar control. But here's where many people become confused. They assume that if sugar can fuel cancer cells, then all sweet foods, including fruits, must be harmful. And that assumption overlooks something important about how real foods work inside the body. When people hear that cancer cells use glucose as fuel, a common reaction is to start eliminating anything that tastes sweet. Many assume that if sugar can feed cancer cells, then foods like fruit must also be dangerous. But this is where the science becomes more complex and far more interesting. Not all sources of sugar behave the same way inside the body. When you eat a piece of fruit, an apple, a pear, a peach, or even a handful of grapes, you are not just consuming fructose or glucose. Whole fruits come packaged with a remarkable combination of nutrients that dramatically change how those natural sugars affect the body. First, fruits contain fiber, which slows down digestion and prevents rapid spikes in blood sugar. Instead of flooding the bloodstream with glucose, fiber helps release energy gradually, allowing the body's metabolic systems to keep glucose under control. Second, fruits are rich in polyphenols, a diverse group of plant compounds that scientists are increasingly studying for their protective effects against disease. Many of these compounds have been shown to influence inflammation, oxidative stress, and even the behavior of cancer cells themselves. In addition to fiber and polyphenols, fruits contain vitamins, minerals, and micronutrients that work together in complex ways. These compounds interact with the body's biological systems, sometimes activating pathways that help cells repair damage or strengthen immune defenses. This complexity is something modern science is still trying to fully understand. Unlike a pharmaceutical drug, which usually contains a single active compound designed to target one pathway, whole foods contain hundreds or even thousands of naturally occurring molecules working together. And increasingly, research suggests that many of these compounds help support the body's ability to resist disease, including cancer. So rather than seeing food as a simple battle between good and bad nutrients, scientists are beginning to view nutrition as part of a much larger system. What we eat doesn't just provide calories, it shapes the biological environment inside the body, influencing how cells behave and how diseases develop. To truly understand cancer, therefore, we have to look beyond individual nutrients and examine something even more fundamental: the microenvironment surrounding every tumor. For many years, cancer was described in a very simple way. Doctors would say someone had breast cancer, colon cancer, or brain cancer, focusing mainly on the organ where the tumor appeared. But modern cancer research has revealed that this view is incomplete. Today, scientists understand that cancer is not just about the tumor itself. It is also about the environment surrounding that tumor, something researchers call the tumor microenvironment. To picture this idea, imagine a fish living inside an aquarium. The health of the fish depends not only on the fish itself, but also on the water, the oxygen levels, the nutrients in the tank, and the overall conditions of that environment. If the environment changes, the fish's ability to survive and thrive changes as well. Cancer works in a similar way. Every tumor exists inside a small ecosystem within the body. Surrounding each cancer cell is a complex environment made up of blood vessels, immune cells, connective tissue, nutrients, and signaling molecules. This environment constantly communicates with the tumor, influencing how fast it grows and how aggressively it behaves. Among the many elements in this microenvironment, nutrients play an important role. Substances like glucose, amino acids, and fats circulate through the bloodstream and are absorbed by both healthy cells and cancer cells. Because cancer cells have highly active metabolism, they are especially efficient at capturing these nutrients. But nutrients are only one piece of the puzzle. The microenvironment also includes the body's immune defenses, which patrol tissues looking for abnormal cells. It includes chemical signals that either stimulate or suppress growth. And critically, it includes the network of blood vessels that deliver oxygen and nutrients to tissues. This network of blood vessels can determine whether a tumor remains small and harmless or whether it gains the resources needed to grow. In other words, cancer cells do not act alone. They depend on their surroundings. And among all the factors in the tumor microenvironment, one of the most powerful influences on cancer growth is the body's ability to create new blood vessels, a process that scientists call angiogenesis. To understand why blood vessels matter so much in cancer, we first need to understand something about how the body normally works. Every tissue in the body depends on a steady supply of oxygen and nutrients delivered through blood vessels. Without this network of vessels, cells simply cannot survive. If tissues are cut off from their blood supply, they begin to weaken and eventually die. This is why blood vessel growth, known as angiogenesis, is such an essential process in human biology. For example, when you get a small cut on your skin, your body quickly begins forming tiny new blood vessels around the wound. These vessels deliver oxygen and nutrients that help repair the damaged tissue. Without angiogenesis, that wound would struggle to heal, but angiogenesis must be carefully controlled. If the body produces too few blood vessels, tissues cannot recover from injury. This is often seen in people with severe diabetes. Because diabetes can damage blood vessel growth, even a small wound on the leg may fail to heal properly. Over time, the tissue may deteriorate, sometimes leading to dangerous infections or even amputation. On the other hand, having too many blood vessels can also cause serious problems. In conditions such as macular degeneration or diabetic retinopathy, excessive blood vessels grow in the back of the eye. These fragile vessels can leak and damage the retina, leading to vision loss or blindness. So the body constantly tries to maintain what scientists sometimes call the Goldilocks balance. Not too few blood vessels, not too many, but just the right amount. To maintain this balance, the body uses a sophisticated system of signals that control when blood vessels should grow and when they should stop. It is similar to how a gardener trims a lawn. If the grass grows too tall, it must be cut back to the proper height. Unfortunately, cancer cells have discovered ways to manipulate this system. They can hijack the body's angiogenesis signals and use them to recruit blood vessels for their own survival. And once a tumor succeeds in doing that, its growth can accelerate dramatically. One of the most surprising discoveries in cancer biology is that tiny cancers are forming in our bodies all the time. At first, this idea sounds alarming, but in reality, it is a normal consequence of how the body works. The human body contains more than 40 trillion cells, and these cells are constantly dividing to replace old or damaged ones. During this process, small mistakes can occur in the DNA. When those mistakes accumulate in a single cell, it can begin forming a tiny cluster of abnormal cells. In other words, microscopic cancers may appear in the body much more often than we realize. Fortunately, most of them never become dangerous. That's because a tumor cannot grow very large without access to oxygen and nutrients. Without a blood supply, a tumor is essentially trapped. Scientists have found that a tumor without blood vessels cannot grow larger than about the size of the tip of a ballpoint pen. At that size, it simply does not receive enough oxygen or energy to expand further. When this happens, the body's immune system usually takes care of the problem. Immune cells constantly patrol the body like security guards, searching for abnormal or damaged cells. When they encounter one of these tiny tumors, they often destroy it before it can cause any harm. But sometimes cancer finds a way to escape this control. Cancer cells can release special proteins known as growth factors. These molecules act like chemical signals that stimulate nearby blood vessels to grow toward the tumor. Once these new vessels begin supplying oxygen and nutrients, the tumor suddenly gains the resources it needs to grow. This process, when cancer recruits its own blood supply, is called tumor angiogenesis. And the moment angiogenesis begins, the situation can change dramatically. A tumor that was once microscopic and harmless can suddenly begin expanding at an astonishing rate. Research has shown that once blood vessels start feeding a tumor, it can grow up to 16,000 times larger in just 2 weeks. This explosive growth is one of the reasons angiogenesis has become such an important target in modern cancer research. Once scientists realized that tumors depend on blood vessels to grow, an important question emerged. Could cancer be stopped by cutting off its blood supply? This idea became the foundation for an entire field of research focused on blocking angiogenesis. If doctors could prevent tumors from recruiting new blood vessels, they could essentially starve the cancer, depriving it of oxygen and nutrients. Over the past few decades, researchers have developed several drugs designed specifically to do this. These treatments, known as anti-angiogenic therapies, work by interfering with the signals cancer cells use to attract blood vessels. Today, some of these medications are used as part of modern cancer treatment and have helped extend the lives of many patients. But during this research, scientists made another fascinating discovery. When the same laboratory tests used to develop anti-angiogenic drugs were applied to natural foods, many of those foods showed surprisingly powerful effects as well. In fact, researchers have now identified more than 100 foods that contain compounds capable of slowing or blocking the formation of blood vessels that feed tumors. One of the earliest examples involved green tea. When scientists tested green tea in angiogenesis experiments, they found that compounds called polyphenols, particularly one known as EGCG, could strongly inhibit the growth of blood vessels supporting tumors. Other plant-based foods contain similar compounds. For example, resveratrol, found in red grapes and red wine, has been shown to influence angiogenesis pathways. Genistein, a natural compound in soy, has also demonstrated the ability to interfere with blood vessel growth associated with certain cancers. And lycopene, the pigment that gives tomatoes their deep red color, has been studied for its potential protective effects as well. What makes these discoveries especially interesting is that foods are incredibly complex. Unlike a pharmaceutical drug that targets a single pathway, plant-based foods contain hundreds of bioactive compounds that may work together to influence the body's defense systems. In other words, nature may already provide a wide range of substances capable of supporting the body in controlling diseases like cancer. Beyond influencing blood vessels that feed tumors, certain foods can also strengthen another powerful defense against cancer, the immune system. Our immune system is constantly working behind the scenes, identifying and removing abnormal cells before they can cause harm. Specialized immune cells such as T cells and natural killer cells act like highly trained soldiers that patrol the body, searching for dangerous threats. When they recognize cancerous or infected cells, they can destroy them before those cells spread. Interestingly, some everyday foods contain natural compounds that can support and activate these immune defenses. One well-known example is blueberries. Blueberries are rich in natural pigments called anthocyanins, which give them their deep blue color. These compounds are more than just antioxidants, they appear to interact with the immune system in meaningful ways. Research has shown that regularly consuming blueberries can help increase the activity of important immune cells, including T cells and natural killer cells. In some studies, individuals who consumed roughly a cup and a half of blueberries per day showed a significant rise in immune cell activity. This doesn't mean blueberries are a cure for disease, but they may help maintain a more responsive immune system. Blueberries also offer another important benefit. They can help reduce excessive inflammation. Inflammation is a natural part of the immune response, but when it becomes chronic, it can contribute to many diseases, including cancer. Anthocyanins appear to help balance this process, supporting immune activity while also calming harmful inflammation. Another food that has attracted strong scientific interest is broccoli. Broccoli and other cruciferous vegetables contain a compound called sulforaphane, which has been widely studied for its potential protective effects. Sulforaphane may help activate detoxification pathways in cells and support immune responses. Interestingly, the concentration of sulforaphane is especially high in broccoli sprouts, the young seedlings of the plant. In fact, these sprouts can contain dramatically higher levels of this compound compared with mature broccoli. Together, foods like blueberries and broccoli demonstrate how everyday nutrition can contribute to strengthening the body's natural defenses. In addition to strengthening the immune system, some foods may also help protect something even more fundamental in the body, our DNA. DNA is the biological blueprint inside every cell. It contains the instructions that control how cells grow, divide, and function. When DNA becomes damaged over time, those errors can accumulate and increase the risk of diseases, including cancer. Protecting DNA and helping the body repair it is therefore one of the most important aspects of long-term health. One surprisingly powerful food in this area is the kiwi fruit. Kiwis may look simple on the outside, small, brown, and fuzzy, but inside they are packed with nutrients that support several of the body's defense systems. They are rich in vitamin C, antioxidants, and dietary fiber, all of which play important roles in maintaining cellular health. Research has shown that eating just one kiwi a day can significantly help protect DNA from oxidative damage. In some studies, participants who consumed one kiwi daily experienced about a 60% reduction in DNA damage within their cells. Even more interesting, consuming 3 kiwis per day appeared to help the body repair existing DNA damage more efficiently. But the benefits of kiwi don't stop there. Kiwis are also an excellent source of dietary fiber, which plays a crucial role in supporting the gut microbiome, the vast community of bacteria living inside the digestive system. This microbiome has a profound influence on immune function, metabolism, and inflammation. In fact, studies have shown that eating even a single kiwi can begin to shift the composition of gut bacteria overnight, encouraging the growth of beneficial species. This highlights an important idea in nutrition science. The foods we eat do not simply nourish our own cells, they also feed the microbial ecosystem living within us. And this microbial community can play a major role in determining how well our body defends itself against disease. Among these beneficial microbes, researchers have recently identified one bacterium that appears to play an especially important role in health and cancer treatment. In recent years, scientists studying the gut microbiome have discovered that certain bacteria inside our digestive system can have a profound influence on how the body responds to disease, including cancer. Among these microbes, one species has attracted particular attention: Akkermansia mucinifila. This bacterium is now considered one of the important guardian species of the gut microbiome. Unlike many other microbes that simply help digest food, Akkermansia lives in the mucus layer lining the intestine. This mucus layer acts like a protective barrier between the gut and the rest of the body, and Akkermansia thrives by maintaining and strengthening this environment. The reason scientists became so interested in Akkermansia comes from research on cancer immunotherapy. Immunotherapy treatments work differently from traditional chemotherapy. Instead of directly killing cancer cells, they help the body's own immune system recognize and attack those cells more effectively. However, immunotherapy does not work equally well for everyone. In many studies, only a portion of patients respond strongly to these treatments. Researchers investigating this mystery analyzed the gut microbiomes of cancer patients undergoing immunotherapy. They discovered something remarkable. The patients who responded well to treatment often had higher levels of Akkermansia mucinifila in their intestines, while those who responded poorly tended to lack this bacterium. This finding suggested that the microbiome, and specifically Akkermansia, might help the immune system function more effectively during cancer treatment. But there was another important discovery. Akkermansia is extremely sensitive to antibiotics. Even a short course of antibiotics can drastically reduce its population in the gut. When that happens, it may take time for the microbiome to rebuild. Unlike many probiotic bacteria that can be consumed directly, Akkermansia is not easily replaced by simply taking a supplement. Instead, the most effective way to support its growth appears to be through dietary choices that nourish the gut environment where it thrives. And this brings us back once again to the powerful connection between food, the microbiome, and the body's natural defenses. Once researchers realized how important Akkermansia mucinifila could be for immune function and cancer treatment, the next question became obvious. How can we support the growth of this beneficial bacterium? Unlike many probiotic bacteria that can be purchased in capsules or supplements, Akkermansia is not something you can simply take as a pill. Instead, it tends to grow naturally when the environment inside the gut supports it, particularly when the intestinal mucus layer is healthy and well-nourished. This is where diet once again becomes important. Certain foods appear to help encourage the growth of Akkermansia by supporting the gut environment it prefers. Among the most interesting examples are pomegranate, cranberries, and Concord grapes. These fruits contain powerful plant compounds called polyphenols, which interact with the microbiome in ways that promote beneficial bacteria. Researchers have found that even relatively small amounts of these foods can influence the gut ecosystem. In some studies, drinking around 8 ounces of pomegranate or cranberry juice per day was associated with increased levels of Akkermansia in the microbiome. To see how meaningful this effect might be, consider a real-world example from clinical practice. A cancer patient preparing to begin immunotherapy had recently taken a course of antibiotics for an infection. When doctors analyzed the patient's gut microbiome, they found that her Akkermansia levels were almost completely depleted, which could potentially reduce the effectiveness of her upcoming treatment. Rather than immediately starting immunotherapy, the medical team decided to focus first on restoring the patient's microbiome. For several weeks, she incorporated foods rich in polyphenols, including cranberry and pomegranate juice, into her daily routine. When her microbiome was tested again after 3 weeks, her Akkermansia levels had increased dramatically, rising well above the average levels found in the general population. After beginning immunotherapy, the patient responded extremely well to treatment. This example highlights an important lesson. In many cases, food and medicine are not competing approaches, they can work together to strengthen the body's ability to fight disease. When people hear about the relationship between food, the microbiome, and disease, they often assume the message is that nutrition should replace medical treatment. But that is not the lesson scientists and physicians are drawing from this research. The real insight is much more balanced. Modern medicine has developed powerful therapies from targeted cancer drugs to advanced immunotherapies that have saved and extended countless lives. These treatments are the result of decades of research, clinical trials, and scientific progress. They remain an essential part of treating serious diseases like cancer. At the same time, scientists are increasingly recognizing that the body possesses its own internal defense systems that influence whether diseases take hold or are kept under control. These systems include mechanisms that regulate blood vessel growth, protect DNA, maintain the gut microbiome, support stem cell regeneration, and activate the immune system. What we eat interacts with all of these systems. Rather than viewing food and medicine as opposing approaches, many researchers now see them as complementary tools. Medicine can target disease directly, while nutrition can strengthen the body's natural defenses, helping it respond more effectively to treatment and maintain long-term health. Another important lesson from this research is that nutrition works best when it focuses on addition rather than restriction. Many people struggle with strict diets because they are built around deprivation, long lists of foods that must be eliminated. This approach can make healthy eating feel like punishment, which often leads people to abandon the diet entirely. A more sustainable approach is to focus on adding beneficial foods that activate the body's protective systems. When people begin incorporating more fruits, vegetables, whole plant foods, and nutrient-rich ingredients into their meals, they naturally crowd out less healthy options over time. In other words, instead of constantly worrying about what must be removed from the diet, we can shift the focus toward what can be added to support the body's defenses. And when nutrition becomes something people enjoy rather than something they fear or resent, it becomes far easier to maintain for life. As we step back and look at the bigger picture, one idea becomes increasingly clear. The body is not defenseless against disease. In fact, it possesses a remarkable network of internal systems designed to protect and repair itself throughout life. Scientists often refer to these as the body's health defense systems. These systems work quietly in the background every day, maintaining balance and responding when something begins to go wrong. One of these systems regulates angiogenesis, the process that controls how blood vessels grow. When functioning properly, it ensures that tissues receive the oxygen and nutrients they need, while preventing dangerous overgrowth of vessels that could support tumors. Another system focuses on DNA protection and repair, helping cells correct the small errors that naturally occur during cell division. By repairing damage before it accumulates, the body can prevent many potential problems from developing into disease. The immune system represents another critical line of defense. It constantly scans the body for abnormal cells, infections, and other threats, responding quickly to eliminate them whenever possible. Then there is the gut microbiome, the vast community of bacteria living in the digestive system. Far from being passive passengers, these microbes actively influence metabolism, immunity, and inflammation. The balance of bacteria in the gut can shape how the body reacts to both health and disease. Finally, the body also relies on systems related to cell regeneration and repair, including stem cells that help renew tissues and maintain long-term resilience. What makes nutrition so powerful is that many foods appear to interact with these defense systems simultaneously. Instead of targeting only one pathway, whole foods provide complex combinations of compounds that support multiple protective processes at once. This is why the most effective message about health may not be about eliminating specific foods or following rigid diets. Instead, it is about strengthening the body's defenses by consistently choosing foods that support these systems. When medicine and nutrition work together, they create a far more powerful strategy, one that helps the body not only treat disease, but also maintain resilience over the long journey of life.